Mr. President, on a very different topic, I wanted a chance to talk today about one of the nominees that's coming before us. Because, Mr. President, when I was a very young girl, when the polio vaccine was approved, and to this very day, I remember my mom saying, thank goodness we can now send our kids to school, not have to worry that they get sick, be paralyzed, or live in an iron lung or worse. The relief was overwhelming. And that is why the fear is so overwhelming now that Donald Trump wants RFK Jr., an outright, unapologetic, anti-vax conspiracy theorist, as our nation's Secretary of Health and Human Services. Now, I want to be clear, I will not be shy about making my concerns quite plain with the American people. That's part of our Senate's role, to advise and consent to the President's nominees. It is our job to vet these nominees and put them through a rigorous process to determine if they are qualified to serve. That's why I met with RFK Jr. yesterday, so I could be direct with him about my concerns with his anti-vaccine record. And so I could discuss the other challenges our nation faces where HHS has a really crucial role. I do appreciate his time, and I appreciate the opportunity to look for areas of common ground. But as I have said already, I oppose his nomination because regardless of any other views he holds, his long history of explicitly anti-vaccine activism is utterly disqualifying. And I am not the only one who is worried. Even Trump's former FDA Commissioner, Scott Gottlieb, has said RFK Jr.'s agenda will cost lives in this country. I mean, just imagine if RFK Jr. was secretary when COVID struck. We still might not have vaccines. After all, he called the COVID vaccine the deadliest vaccine ever made. This isn't a case where we can just look for areas of agreement or hope for the best, maybe drug costs, maybe healthy food. We're talking about a conspiracy theorist who is openly antagonistic to public health, and it will have tremendous authority over Americans' lives and their health care. It is not asking too much to have a Secretary of Health who believes in healthy food and believes in vaccines, especially when we are already backsliding on vaccines and seeing real and deadly consequences. We eliminated measles in 2000, but last year we had 16 outbreaks. Whooping cough has spiked in the country and in my home state of Washington. Polio, even polio, is making a comeback. These are dangerous diseases, and RFK Jr. will let them spread through our communities and schools like wildfire. And as any parent knows, when a bug goes around a school, it doesn't stop there. It comes home to mom and dad, baby brothers and sisters who could be at serious risk. So I'm here this afternoon to talk some truth to the American people about the stakes here and lay out the facts for anyone who might not appreciate the serious threat posed by RFK Jr. Maybe you think, well, he's not talking about vaccines like polio or measles, or he's only asking questions. Except know this, he founded a nonprofit entirely focused on attacking vaccines. RFK Jr.'s nonprofit has made videos promoting falsehoods about vaccines and autism and sowing distrust in vaccines, especially among the Black community. They tried to revoke the emergency authorization for kids' COVID vaccines. They sued against measles vaccine requirements, even amongst measles outbreaks. And it's not just RFK Jr.'s nonprofit that should raise alarm here. He has said he doesn't know if the polio vaccine caused more deaths than it prevented. Or another example, the HPV vaccine has led to a huge drop in cervical cancer. RFK Jr. suggested it increases cancer risk. And let's not get cute here with excuses like, well, he's just asking questions, because when he says we need to know vaccines are safe, he is ignoring the centuries of research we have already done on these vaccines. We do know they are safe. And what's more, he has not just been asking questions. These are statements I'm going to give you that RFK Jr. has made. These are in his own words. He said, and I quote, "I do believe that autism does come from vaccines." He said, quote, "They get the shot, that night they have a fever of 103, they go to sleep, 3 months later their brain's gone." Again, he said the COVID vaccine was, quote, the deadliest vaccine ever made. These statements are not just false. They are, Mr. President, irresponsible, and they are disqualifying. Given his track record, we cannot just hope that if RFK Jr. finally gets power to undermine vaccines, a cause that he has, by the way, dedicated considerable time and money and effort to, that he'll just give that up. That is not believable, especially when we know the lawyer helping him put together a team has tried to have 14 different vaccines pulled from the market himself, including, by the way, the polio vaccine. And if you are thinking, well, he can't really do anything about vaccines, you need to think again. If confirmed, RFK Jr. would have tremendous power to undermine vaccines. He could influence FDA's approval of medicine and drugs. He could directly appoint people to CDC's vaccine board, which influences vaccine coverage and costs. He said he will fire top researchers by the hundreds and pause infectious disease research for years, a threat far beyond vaccines, I would say. And let's not downplay the fact that as secretary, he would have one of the biggest megaphones in the world to spread anti-vaccine misinformation. Maybe you are someone who thinks, so what if we have more whooping cough? Or a lot of people have had measles, they lived. Well, I realize that some people probably think like that because they have never seen the reality of these terrible diseases, because vaccines have been so effective. A nurse recently shared online what whooping cough can do to a baby, what she has watched families go through herself. I will warn you, it was soul-crushing. First, the baby can't stop coughing, not even to eat, not even to breathe. Then come seizures and strokes, then a breathing tube and a ventilator, and finally a machine to take over failing heart and lung function, and then they die. That is horrific. That is whooping cough, and it's far from the only disease at risk of a comeback. We don't want that to happen here in this country or around the globe. Let's talk about measles. It is one of the world's most contagious diseases. It is easily spread by coughing and sneezing. It lingers in the air for hours, and you are contagious 4 days before you develop a rash and 4 days after. Now, before the vaccine, millions of people caught measles annually, meaning thousands were hospitalized, hundreds died, most of them young children. But this is just not just history. You want to know what RFK Jr. would do as Secretary of Health? I want you to look at Samoa. Before Samoa had a measles outbreak, he was there. He was there, propping up vaccine deniers and falsely blaming deaths on the measles vaccine. After Samoa had a tremendous measles outbreak with over 100 hospitalized and at least 83 dead, mostly kids, no apology from him, no admitting he was wrong. Instead, he doubled down and wrote to the Prime Minister suggesting vaccines were part of the problem. That is who we want to put in charge of our nation's healthcare? What do we think is going to happen? How many outright lies are we going to tolerate? How many deaths before we realize this nonsense is dangerous? And look, the vaccine lies just scratch the surface here. This is someone who won't accept that HIV causes AIDS. This is someone who thinks chemicals in the water might turn people gay. He said that. This is someone who thinks 5G wireless is being used to, quote, control our behavior. This is not someone that we in the United States Senate should be telling the American people to trust on health care. He's not someone that should be handling the levers of power. And for that matter, the same goes for some of Trump's other health care nominees who have ignored science and promoted false conspiracy theories. His nominee to lead the CRC is an anti-abortion extremist with zero public health experience, unless you count peddling the conspiracy theory that vaccines cause autism or promoting junk healthcare plans. And then you have Dr. Oz, who's been named to lead CMS, someone who is known for pushing quack treatments and debunked junk science, who will be shaping healthcare coverage for millions despite clear conflicts of interest. I cannot drive home enough to the United States Senate. This is not a game. These are not political roles without consequence. They have real power over whether Americans can get basic information and health care. Mr. President, I want to end on this note, and it is important. Vaccines save lives. That is not a question. It is not a slogan. It is a fact. And if you cannot accept that fact, if you cannot be honest with the American people about it, if when parents look to you, worried about their newborn, wanting to do what's best for their baby, trusting your advice as a public health leader, if you cannot tell them the same truth that centuries of science and experience tells us, which is that vaccines are safe and effective and life-saving, then you have absolutely no business leading the Department of Health and Human Services. None. That should not be up for debate. A vaccine denier should not be our highest-ranking healthcare official. Thank you, Mr. President. I yield the floor.